sermon on Matthew 5:38 to 42. Matthew 5:38 to 42 records Jesus addressing a principle deeply embedded within the law and the social framework of Israel. The passage reads, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." The statement Jesus references, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, comes from the judicial instructions given to Israel in the Torah. It appears in passages such as Exodus 21:24, Leviticus 24:20, and Deuteronomy 19:21. This principle, often called lex talionis, was not a personal ethic of revenge, but a legal guideline for judges in Israel's courts. It limited retaliation so that punishment would be proportional rather than excessive. By the first century, however, the principle had come to shape cultural attitudes toward personal grievance. What had originally been a judicial standard was often interpreted in everyday life as justification for retaliation. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus repeatedly contrasts what his hearers had been taught with the authority of his own words. When he says, "But I say to you," he is not discarding the law's original intent, but revealing the nature of the kingdom that was arriving in his ministry. The kingdom he proclaimed was breaking into the present age of Israel's covenant history. The command not to resist the evil person is followed by 4 examples drawn from common experiences in Judea under Roman rule. First, Jesus speaks of being struck on the right cheek. In the culture of the time, a slap on the right cheek was most likely delivered with the back of the hand. Such a gesture was more than physical harm. It was an insult meant to demean. The response Jesus describes, turning the other cheek, portrays a refusal to escalate the insult into retaliation. Second, he describes a legal dispute over clothing. The tunic was an inner garment, while the cloak was an outer garment that often doubled as a blanket for the poor. The law itself protected a person's cloak from being permanently taken as collateral. Exodus 22:26 to 27. Yet in this example, the person willingly relinquishes even more than what the opponent demands. Third, Jesus refers to the practice of being compelled to go 1 mile. This reflects a Roman legal custom that allowed soldiers to require civilians to carry equipment for a certain distance. The historical background of this practice appears elsewhere in the Gospels, such as when Simon of Cyrene was compelled to carry Jesus' cross. In Jesus' illustration, the person voluntarily exceeds the imposed distance. Finally, Jesus speaks of giving to the one who asks and not turning away from the one who wishes to borrow. These sayings must be understood within the historical setting of Israel in the first century. The nation lived under Roman authority, and tensions within Jewish society were intense. Movements advocating violent resistance to Rome would later erupt into the war that culminated in the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70. Against that backdrop, Jesus announced the arrival of God's reign and called his hearers to a radically different posture from the cycle of retaliation and revolt that characterized the age. His words revealed the character of the kingdom that was already appearing in his ministry and would reach its covenantal culmination within that generation. Within this kingdom framework, the emphasis falls on relinquishing personal claims to retaliation and embracing a posture of generosity and restraint. The commands depict a community whose identity is not shaped by the legal demands of retribution, but by the gracious character of the reign of God that Christ was unveiling. Throughout the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus moves beyond the external administration of the law and reveals the deeper reality of the kingdom he embodies. The righteousness he describes does not arise from enforcing personal rights, but from a transformed relationship to the covenant order that was passing away. In this teaching, Jesus stands as the authoritative interpreter of Israel's law and the inaugurator of the age that was dawning in his ministry. His words anticipate the transition from the Old Covenant framework, centered on judicial recompense and national law, to the reality of the kingdom established through his work. Thus, Matthew 5:38 to 42 forms part of Jesus' larger proclamation that the long-awaited fulfillment of Israel's story had arrived. In his teaching, the patterns of retaliation and legal entitlement that belong to the old order give way to the generosity and restraint that characterize the kingdom he was bringing into being.